Ahoy everyone, Tightrope here. About a week ago, there was an interesting post on the Company of Heroes subreddit from the creator of this website, COHDB.com, Inverse. It's about the win rates of each battle group in every mode. Now, it's my understanding that Relic has this information, but this is the first time these numbers have been made available to the general public. So with a balance patch coming out in about a week and a half's time, I figured it was a good opportunity to have a look through these numbers. Maybe I can offer some explanations of what's going on and maybe what we could expect to see changed in the upcoming patch. We're starting out with 1v1 because that's what I play, so that's what I feel the most confident discussing. And you'll see we're starting out at the top, not applicable. This is when the player did not select their battle group, and that actually has a shockingly high win rate. A couple of explanations for that perhaps. If the player is already winning, they don't feel like they need the extra source from battle group to carry them to victory, so they don't need to select it. Alternatively, I saw a theory on Reddit that maybe when a player drops, like the AI instantly selects a battle group, whereas the other player just waiting for the result to register, maybe the rest of the team to leave or whatever. If it's a team game, they don't select their battle groups. So maybe that's an explanation because it happens through every mode. The win rate for not applicable is quite high. So we're going into US forces now. You can see starting out with the 3 vanilla battle groups and then the DLC battle groups in the order that they were released. So you can see it's not looking very good for US forces right now. The only positive win rate is for US forces armored, and Italian partisans are really down the dumps. This is actually the lowest win rate of any battle group in any mode. Italian partisans in 1v1 are the worst. Airborne has the highest pick rate of any of the US forces battle groups. I imagine that there's still quite a few players that don't own the DLC battle groups, so that perhaps partially explains why the vanilla battle groups are more popular than the DLC ones. But yeah, Airborne is the highest pick rate, though it's slightly below average in terms of win rate. I think Airborne's popularity can be explained by its versatility. Kind of gives you options at all stages of the game. In the early game, you've got Pathfinders that open up alternative build orders, or the power drop machine gun, which can be a real nuisance getting it into a building in the relatively early stages. Paratroopers and anti-tank guns allows you some tech skipping options. You can get the triple zoop paras, which are pretty strong and hold up well against DAC in the late game. And the AT gun allows you to skip motor pool. Recon plane, very useful all game long. Power drop reinforcements, a real menace in 1v1s. You can drop this somewhere in the middle of the map when you've already got quite a few low health squads on the field. Save yourself a lot of manpower and gain a lot of map control, because it's really hard to get rid of any squads when they're doing this, and this is big in 1v1s, can lead to a lot of map control. And then in the late game, we've got a couple options. Carpet bombing, I think generally pretty easy to dodge in ones. Not a massive factor, but the rocket strafe is a pretty good. If you get engine damage on tank, this can easily finish something off or just catch the enemy unawares. Rear arm hits can even knock out a tiger with just about one pass. So yeah, a lot of versatility at all stages of the game from Airborne. I wouldn't expect to see any changes to this in the patch. Armored has the highest win rate, and it is the 3rd most popular, taking up just under a quarter of all picks. I think the Scot is actually performing pretty well in 1v1s at the moment. You can get out at 4 command points if you rush it, and that's irrelevant timing because it will arrive before the enemy's medium tanks will, before the Panzer IIIs or the Panzer IVs. So you can do some damage before you're up against that kind of threat. And it can really apply a lot of bleed to Wehrmacht flak guns, the team weapons, which are very popular at the moment. And it kind of allows you to keep up like bleed for bleed. Wirbelwinds doing bleed to you versus your Scots doing bleed to the Wehrmacht units. And then in the late game, it offers you a lot of potential because Strength and Steel allows you to get like extra units out. You're suffering like less manpower attrition to pop cap thanks to Strength and Steel. And then in the late game, maybe you can get like 2 extra units compared to your opponent when you're both like creeping up against the pop cap. And that can give you a big edge in 1v1s. Having like 2 extra units in the big game and the late game is a big deal. And then, of course, the Easy 8 is just an absolute hammer. Still the king of the medium tanks. This thing is a beast in all modes. So yeah, that's maybe why Armored is the best. Spec Ops is the 2nd most popular pick, and it has a pretty solid win rate for US forces. The whiz-bang's still good in 1v1, so it's not quite such a menace like it is in the bigger team modes. Advanced infantry though, that is lagging. 45% win rate, this is pretty shoddy, but still pretty popular. I'll explain why I think advanced infantry is struggling, and a lot of it comes down to ranges. Now that casualty clearing got changed on the medical station to give you plus 25 manpower instead of a free reinforcement, an expensive to reinforce squad like Rangers really felt the burn from that change. On top of that, you kind of incentivized to go for the infantry support center to buff up your Rangers, but now the captain doesn't get the LMG for free, so you don't get that early game power spike of the LMG captain, which really helps you out a lot against DAC. Being able to force away the Crutchets and the 250 with that early LMG counted a lot. So yeah, that hurts advanced infantry proportionally a lot more than the other battle groups. And you can't forget that Rangers also had their scatter nerfed on their bazookas and stuff as well when they're firing on the move. So I could definitely imagine a reinforced cost discount to Rangers in the upcoming patch. Elsewhere in the battle group, everything else is kind of okay, though you do have to pay twice for howitzer and then free fire. Whereas compared to DAC on the Kanone, you get the free fire for free. I think this is like fine as it is, but maybe the DAC Kanone auto fire needs to be nerfed by comparison. Heavy weapons has an okay win rate, but a surprisingly low pick rate. I'm surprised by that low pick rate because I think heavy weapons has a lot going for it. Obviously, it's got the 50 cal, which is very strong for a machine gun and very good at suppressing units in light cover, which counts for a lot. And then you can buff that up further by making them move around faster and extra team member models, which makes them really hard to get rid of. Got the assault carriers on the other side. This helps out a lot against early light vehicle pressure. This can diffuse the threat from a 221 pre-Panzerbuchse upgrade, which is very popular to use against US forces at the moment, and just generally against the DAC light vehicle shenanigans. I do quite like the assault carrier, even after it got the health nerf a while ago. And then in the late game, obviously the Pershing is just still an absolute win condition in 1v1s, though it's very hard to save up for it these days, like most call in heavy tanks. But yeah, it's still an absolute weapon in 1v1s. And then on the other side, you've got the M5, which I think maybe is underutilized in 1v1s, can really help you out against the Stug D and the Brombeer, which are both very popular at the moment, wiping your US infantry. And you don't need tech to call this in as well. So if you're a little bit behind, this can really help you out against those two unit types. And finally, Partisans. As I mentioned, this is the lowest win rate of any battle group we'll look at today. And it also has an extremely low pick rate after it got hit with a load of nerfs in the previous patch 2.2.5. If you guys watch my stream, you'll probably know that I have been playing quite a lot of Italian Partisans myself recently. And I think I've been doing okay with them. I haven't been contributing to the negative win rate. I don't think so. And the secret has been combining it up with the air support center. Because underground detonation got nerfed so much, I don't think it's really that worth getting anymore. It's just too easy to dodge, too easy to hear coming, I think. So I've been sinking my munitions into the planes instead, and I think it's been going reasonably well for me. So my tactic has been going for smuggling routes, just using these on tunnels, not really using the tunnels like too much, pushing my units out of it so that the enemy doesn't get suspicious, just kind of using them more as caches, and then getting that extra fuel, extra munitions into extra planes, getting my medium tanks out earlier, and that's just been helping me out quite a bit. But yeah, I do think in terms of what's happened, obviously they got hit with so many nerfs in the previous patch. I think maybe Partisans themselves got a little bit over nerfed. Maybe the manpower cost increase wasn't necessary. Perhaps they might need like a slight health buff, something like that, because they bleed a lot. And similar story with Rangers, even though it's not quite such a big deal. 30 manpower per model compared to 25 reinforced you're getting back from the casualty clearing. Hurts as infantry heavy battle group Partisans quite a lot as well. One of the combos you can do with Partisans and the air support center is you can bring across the recon plane and then auto construct one of the tunnels somewhere in the corner. So that's maybe one way you could sneak up a smuggling route's cache without the enemy noticing. So try that combo out for yourselves. Moving on to Wehrmacht, and if I'm honest, these ones make quite a lot less sense to me. First off, looking at pick rate, you can see that the 3 vanilla battle groups are still by far the most popular, more than double of any of the DLC battle groups. And the spread in win rate is also lower. It's like about 5.5% compared to about 8% difference between the best and worst for US forces. So a lower spread for Wehrmacht. But then the best battle group apparently is Terror, which is a big surprise to me. Looking at the Terror battle group, there's nothing in here that jumps out to me. I'm like, wow, this is what makes this the highest win rate battle group for 1v1s. Sure, machine gun camouflage, pretty decent in the early game, but usually there's a lot of recce sections running around, revealing these. This makes it, it's still good, but it's not incredible. Similar story, Interrogate is pretty solid, gives you some intel, gives you some more experience, but it's just like an incremental gain, nothing that strong. Then in the mid to late game, Jericho Trumpet I think is good, but I think it maybe does even offer more value in team games than it does in ones. And V1 maybe a little bit overcosted for how easy it is to dodge these days. These buffs are kind of mediocre. And again, King Tiger, similar to other heavy tanks, like it's very good when it comes in, but it's pretty hard to stall for it. So I'm surprised that this has the highest win rate. Maybe it's because it's not that popular. The people who know it, they know it very well. They like to play it, and that's causing the win rate to increase. I'm not sure. Mechanized is the most popular, and it offers the second best win rate. This makes a lot more sense to me. You've got the get out of jail for free card with the smoke from raid package. Stroke call-ins, a powerful option. The 8-rad, maybe it arrives a little bit late, but in the right circumstances on the right map can still be pretty strong. And then you've still got a no-tech call-in option here for the Panther. Also, Panther can really give you some extra oomph in the anti-tank department to help you fight back against things like grants in the late game. The other side of the tree, maybe not as important for 1v1s. I think this is more of a team game ability. This is just like okay. Vespa is kind of nice to have some extra artillery option, especially if you've gone for Luftwaffe Company, which tends to be a little bit more popular in ones than Panzergrenadier Company. And then finally, zeroing artillery. It's just like a fine ability, can force units to move away, can decrew and annihilate team weapons, which is always important. So yeah, pretty strong option for 1v1s, and I'm not surprised that this is one of the best. Last Stand is the third most successful battle group and the most picked out of all the DLC battle groups, in spite of being the newest. I've been playing a lot of Last Stand over the past few weeks, so I feel pretty qualified on this one. I think Stern Pioneers are still good, even after all of their nerfs. I don't think they're overtuned at the moment, but just gives Wehrmacht like another option in the early game where sometimes they're a bit weak. Panzerfaust Roller I think is very good for 1v1s because you kind of have to cover a larger area with fewer units, so having snares available across a wider battlefront is very, very handy, can shut down the enemy's vehicles and, maybe deny some opportunities where usually a player will want to like ram on top of your Stosstrooper with their vehicle. Now they have to worry about getting Fausted. I think the Borgward is actually very good. People are sleeping on this unit. The demo charges, the snaring potential. Look out. I think Borgwards will grow in popularity going forwards. Then we've got Nebelware for Overwatch. It's just like a really solid off-map, covers a large area for a very long time. Decent like damage potential as well, but yeah, just the area denial from this is very strong. And the rest of the battle group's okay. I think the Panther term quite weak, will probably need a buff. Recovery efforts also extremely strong, while vehicle salvage is still so good. And maybe once vehicle salvage gets tuned down, this battle group will take a slight hit. On the other end of things, Luftwaffe has the lowest win rate for Wehrmacht, but it has the second highest pick rate. I'm actually surprised by Luftwaffe's low win rate because on paper it does offer quite a lot to 1v1. Fallschirmjäger, I think they're okay. They're not that great. You can maybe mix in one squad of them with the grenade launcher. Works fine, especially on maps with a lot of cover and garrisons. But yeah, they're not really a highlight of this battle group. The LG-40, it offers up some extra anti-tank options in the early game. The problem with it is it has very bad long-range accuracy. So you try to shoot at light vehicles with it, and it just misses them all the time. So, and doesn't scale very well. So it can be a little bit of a trap, this unit. Coming down the other side, the strafe is pretty handy. Sees quite a lot of play. The recon strafe is less good, barely sees any use. Maybe needs to last a little bit longer, maybe like linger, fly over the battlefield a bit slower or something like that. Fallschirmjäger, maybe this is where this battle group is falling down because I think Fallschirmjäger can be strong, but they're very reliant on getting their ambush bonus. If you're not consistently getting the ambush bonus with the Fallschirmjäger, they can feel quite weak. I think maybe especially like noobs like to spam them. So spamming them, they're not getting the ambush bonus, they're bleeding a lot, and maybe that's where this battle group is falling apart. Especially in 1v1s where you have to be a bit more active with your units, having to run them around the field, capping constantly. You can't afford to like sit in cover and wait for an enemy to run at you like you can in some of the other modes quite so much. So maybe this is where the battle group is falling down. But yeah, in the late game, strong, reinforced cost discount, that's good. And the loiter, even after the nerfs, like the anti-tank pass doesn't do much, but being able to pin units, it pins really well. And that can make a big difference in those late game skirmishes. So I'm shocked that Luftwaffe is the lowest win rate for Wehrmacht. The second worst is Italian Coastal, and it's also the least popular. And about 0.5% better than that is Breakthrough. In the high ranks, Italian Coastal is actually considered pretty good because the manpower economy with coastal reserves getting free reinforcements of bunkers, it's just hard to keep up with that kind of efficiency. And then the officer got buffed recently, so the rate of fire boost on the Obice is much more potent than it used to be. Plopping designate defensive line down somewhere in the middle of the map can just be really hard to push off and overwhelm, especially combined up with the flak team weapons. Setting this up somewhere near the middle of the map is just really hard to get rid of and finally dislodge. Then the cheap bunkers are also very efficient. So overall, very good economy with the Italian Coastal, but it does require a pretty specific play style. And I think maybe this is also quite an attractive battle group for new players who just want to spam bunkers and don't really understand how to play the game. And maybe that's what's dragging the win rate down. Breakthrough took a big hit with the Tiger becoming more expensive without tech, same as the other big heavy tank call-ins. I think it hurt this battle group the most because predominant strategy before that was just spamming lots of whirlwinds, installing for the Tiger, and that was very hard to keep up with, and that is no more. But I still think this can be viable. If you go rapid production, you get the 221 out earlier, and that can help you apply a lot more bleed to US forces, especially with the 221. And then rapidly coming down this side of the tree, you can still spam whirlwinds and then back them up with the command tank. Doesn't have quite the same punch, but it's really just about taking the advantage early with that 221 and keeping the lead going. This can help shore up your anti-tank a little bit against things like the Greyhound, Chaffee, and Stuart, while still offering some utility. So I think that still offers, viability at least in 1v1s. Assault packages, I don't know, they probably need something. They've kind of been languishing for quite a few patches, and the buffs to Rifleman's long range kind of just exacerbated this issue. Obviously, Breakthrough got nerfed quite a lot. It's still okay, but it's not the powerhouse that it used to be. So I do think Breakthrough is still viable, but it's a much more narrow path to victory than it used to be. Moving on to the British forces now, and the thing that jumps off the page is Canadian Shock. With nearly a 57% win rate, this is the highest win rate of any battle group in any mode. In terms of pick rate, it also bucks the trend. It is the most picked in spite of being a DLC battle group. I think the main reason behind this incredibly high win rate for Canadian Shock is attacking spirit, the in-combat healing you get from decapturing a point. Obviously, in 1v1, there's a lot of capturing and decapturing of territory sectors, so that gives a lot of opportunities for this to proc. And then once attacking spirit is active, it's basically impossible to win a one-on-one infantry fight against that unit. So you have to bring numbers to the fight or have to go with other tactics like suppression or vehicles, and it's just really, really hard to keep up on map control while this is happening. It also allows the Brit player to maybe delay getting healing, and they can invest that fuel into weapon upgrades, faster light vehicles, stuff like that. So yeah, attacking spirit, I think, especially against Wehrmacht, is very hard to deal with. As Wehrmacht, because you cannot win those one-on-one infantry firefights because of the attacking spirit buff, then you're kind of encouraged to go for suppression, because if you can suppress the squads, that's going to lower their effectiveness. Maybe you can win the engagement that way. But unfortunately, if you do that, in the not too distant future, they're going to come up with these nuclear grenades and just wipe your team weapons with ease. So yeah, it makes it really hard for Wehrmacht. It's not too bad for DAC fighting against Canadian Shock, because they can put a squad inside 250, kind of bully the squads around that way, and that lowers its effectiveness. But against Wehrmacht, this is a brutal battle group. And if you're behind, you've still got the Churchill Crocodile that doesn't require tech to get a discount, and this can help you come back in to the late game. You can maybe go for maybe like 2 Stuarts, infantry training, shore up your fighting potential at that stage, and then call on the croc to get you out of trouble. So yeah, it's got some nasty tricks. I think they really have to change something about attacking spirit. This just doesn't work well. In combat healing, it's just no good for the game. In 1v1s, it's just terrible, and they probably need to put the croc behind tech. Heavy armor is the second most successful battle group for Brits in ones, and it has a pretty similar pick rate to these other three. Heavy armor being the second most successful battle group is actually a big surprise to me, because I probably would have rated it as the worst for 1v1s, simply because I don't think it offers you that much in the first 12 to 15 minutes of the game. So the vet boost is like okay, but it's not that influential. Since it's got a command point cost nerf, comes on like quite late now. You can't really go for sapper spam strategies anymore. It's just like not that high of a boost. On the other side, like vehicle withdraw and refit, you can maybe trade out your dingo, but I don't think a dingo start is that strong in 1v1s because you do sacrifice a bit of capping power by going for it. So it's like okay, but yeah, as I said, it's not that strong. And radio net again isn't that strong. I don't think the rate of fire boost works on the Humber, if I remember rightly. So yeah, this is not that much until you get to the Churchill, which I think is pretty strong in 1v1s, especially against Wehrmacht. They can have a lot of trouble penetrating it. And the recon artillery, again, pretty strong against Wehrmacht because it can like maybe get on top of their team weapons, get them out of position, and just the vision from this pretty strong as well. So pretty strong late game, I think, but weak in the early game. And I think usually most of the strongest battle groups offer you something in the early stages. So big surprise about this win rate. The worst performer for Brits is Air and Sea, and the second worst is Indian Artillery. Air and Sea feels like more of a team game battle group to me, so it's not a surprise that it's struggling in ones. Starting over here, supply surplus caches aren't much of a thing in 1v1s, and the strategic points on the 1v1 maps are usually in quite aggressive positions, so you can't put your mid tents down on it. And I think this is overcosted to use in 1v1s. So yeah, don't get much over here. I think the Centaur is pretty decent now after it got its range buff in the previous patch. But if you compare its timing to like a COHDB, it's not very favorable. And it can't really like chase squads down for wipes very well compared to a Crusader or something like that. So it's reasonable, but it's not like a game winner. It's just like something, an alternative if you want to try it out. It's pretty fun to use, but yeah, it's not a game winner. On the other side, Commandos coming in at this command point, I do think they're a good unit for sure, and especially because they have an anti-tank raid, it justifies you being able to build them. But at this timing of the game, you often need to invest into like anti-tank guns and stuff like that, so it can be hard to fit them into your composition. I think the Pack Howie is pretty solid this patch, same as the LEIG if you need it. And then the Commando support section is pretty decent overall, but again, it's even harder to justify than the Commando because it doesn't have snares, and you've already got Tommies to do your long range damage. So yeah, hard to justify him. And then looking at the late game options, I think assault fleets are very, very good for 1v1s. Probably like the highlight of this battle group for me. Naval bombardment, you don't usually need this really too much for ones. Comes in a little bit slow, easier to dodge. You know, in the chaos and the unit density of 4s, I think it's good, but 1's underwhelming. Incendiary bombing, I think this is again a little bit lackluster for 1s. And anti-tank rocket loiter. Now that there are not too many heavy tanks in the game, these don't often hit a lot of units. Sometimes it can be useful if DAC doesn't have AA. You know, the Martyrs can sometimes be a bit slow and stuff and it can hit them, but a little bit underwhelming. So yeah, it just doesn't offer that much for 1v1s, I think, at least with the way the meta is right now. Indian Artillery having the second worst win rate is a big surprise to me because I think this battle group is good. Warcry recently got buffed and is very strong now. Gurkhas somehow feel easier to fit into your composition than Commandos in spite of coming in at the same command point timing. I suppose they're just easier to use as well. You can just like, move them forwards. Don't require much thinking. Who doesn't love a manpower discount? Really strong. Helps you out in the late game. Heavy mortar I think is very good against Wehrmacht. Pretty trash against DAC, but a good option against Wehrmacht for sure. Off-map airburst comes in pretty quickly, covers a decent area, just good at forcing team weapons and stuff to move, doesn't cost that much, just a reasonable off-map. Maybe this is where the battle group falls down for 1v1s because perimeter monitor is pretty much unusable for 1s all of these sector-based abilities are just about universally trash in 1v1s because the sectors in 1v1s are so much smaller and it's so easy for the enemy to just like move out of the sector. Whereas in 4v4s, the sectors can be large, can be harder to avoid this kind of stuff. The BL 5.5 is a pretty reasonable howitzer overall, but doesn't really fit into the 1v1 meta that well. Moving on to DAK and Kriegsmarine is actually their #1 win rate battle group. It's also got the second highest pick rate of any DLC battle group we've seen so far. With Kriegsmarine, you can get off to a really fast start by putting a Kriegsmarine inside a 250, and that's incredibly hard for the allies to deal with until they get their own light vehicles out, maybe 6 minutes onwards. So you get off to a fast start that way, and you kind of ride that wave of momentum, maybe put down some hard points, start getting those crates going, and you upgrade them with these flak terms, which I think are pretty cheap for how hard they are to kill, and then that kind of boxes your opponent off the map. And then it also seems to synergize pretty well with Stug D play, so you roll that fast start into some fast Stug Ds, and it's just hard for your opponent to come back. But counter to that, if you fall behind, you get off to a bad start, maybe your 250 dies early on, it can kind of snowball back the other way. If you can't get the hard points up, this can really fail to launch. You've got plenty of good options to spend your munitions on. It kind of just depends what your opponent's doing, so it gives you some flexibility. Out of the 4 factions, DAK have the lowest spread between their best and worst performing battle groups, and maybe that points to DAK's basic roster being quite strong. But looking at these strugglers, somewhat surprisingly, it's Italian infantry with the highest pick rate that's doing the worst. I thought Italian infantry was one of the best battle groups for 1v1 because you've got the Guastatori, which seem to be pretty solid in the meta right now. Both of these options are decent. This is pretty cheap, can be pretty good at wiping stuff if the opponent doesn't immediately notice, and just having bunkers and tellers is reasonable. And the powerhouse of Italian infantry, I think, is the Cannone. Comes in pretty fast these days after all the command point cost reductions it's got over the previous few patches. You can often rely on 250 healing until you get the Cannone out, so you don't have to build a mid truck. You can just upgrade the truck that it comes with. You can set the Cannone up in your base so the enemy can't really attack it or hit it with off maps. And then the Cannone can often reach pretty relevant spots with its auto fire from the base on a lot of 1v1 maps. And that just makes the Cannone really a big nuisance. In fact, I could imagine the Cannone's auto fire getting nerfed in the next patch. That's how good this is. Coming down the other side, territory booby traps are just decent. Sound the alarm, another sector-based ability which doesn't really work for 1v1s. L6s are pretty much dead at the moment. Maybe they'll get buffed at some stage. But this is another powerhouse for Italian infantry, prepared positions, making your teammates so much stronger like this. Makes them really hard to deal with. Propaganda War used to be decent against the Renterblob column, but that's not that popular anymore as we saw earlier. But the Obice is just like a solid off-map, good at displacing the enemy. Hits pretty hard. So I can't really explain why Italian infantry is doing so poorly in the 1v1 stats. Moving up to 2v2, for US forces, the most successful battle group is actually Partisans, in spite of having the lowest pick rate. I suppose maybe it's like a good option on some maps like Torrente, which have a lot of buildings. Maybe that's like pushing up its relative win rate. Second best option, Spec Ops, which is also the most popular, pretty close to Airborne. But overall, not a massive spread in win rate differential between any of these battle groups, with advanced infantry lagging a little bit behind. For Wehrmacht, Terra actually has the highest win rate, which is the same as in 1v1, in spite of not being picked that often. I think the Jericho Trumpet is probably at its peak in 2v2s, in terms of coverage of the area, not that much AA to shoot down. And the V1 has some uses for, like, if the tow vehicle died, actually decrewing and then killing the weapon for a 17-pounder. So that makes some sense. The most popular option is mechanized, with Luftwaffe not too far behind and breakthroughs really lagging behind on the win rates. For British forces, it's a similar story to 1v1. Canadian Shock is once again dominating the highest win rate of any battle group in 2v2, though its pick rate not quite as popular as it was in 1s. Bit of a surprise that Australian defence is lagging behind in terms of win rate though, because I thought the Archer was pretty good in 2s. For DAK, the most popular option by far is Italian infantry with nearly 31% pick rate, the highest we've seen of anything so far, but the biggest win rate is actually Panzer Command, nearly 52%. But overall, there's a very small spread between the highest and lowest win rate, kind of similar to what we saw in 1v1s. Moving up to 3v3 now, and we can see that US forces overall win rate isn't the best, but the difference between the best battle group, which is Airborne, and the worst, which is Italian Partisans, is less than 2% win rate. So pretty small margins here at 3v3. In terms of popularity though, Airborne is also the most popular, followed by Spec Ops, and very closely followed by Advanced Infantry, which is a big surprise because we saw that it's not performing that well. Though I imagine the frontline medical station becomes much more relevant in 3s and 4s than it is in 1s and 2s, so maybe that's part of the reason. But yeah, very popular for a DLC battle group. For Wehrmacht, once again, it is Terror with the highest win rate, to my surprise, followed up by Italian Coastals. I think that bunker style starts to become really tough to dislodge in those big team modes. And then Last Stand. Mechanized is the most popular. It's still above 50% win rate, but the lowest win rate for 3v3s is Breakthrough. I could definitely imagine a lot of players trying to stall for the Tiger, not producing enough units and getting themselves into trouble. It doesn't offer you that much else for team games, Breakthrough. With the Opal Blitz resource boosting truck's pretty solid, but no like hammer of an off map or anything like that to bail you out of trouble. For the British forces, once again, it is Canadian Shock that has the highest win rate, same as it has in 1s and 2s, followed up by Heavy Armor. I think that the early game options are maybe not as important in the big team modes as they are in 1s and 2s. So Heavy Armor with a strong late game, carrying it to a high win rate. Australian Defence, though, surprising me by how low its win rate is. I thought the Archer would carry it to victory. Maybe the Archer's not that good on some of the 3v3 maps and the ones that are in the pool, I'm not sure. But a bit of a shock that it's so low. And finally, DAC are obviously performing very well in 3v3s at the moment because all of their battle groups are above 50%, but their finest is Kriegsmarine with just under 54%. And it's also got a very high pick rate for a DLC battle group, nearly 20%. I think this probably makes sense because those flak terms, really good if just like one player on your team can just shoot down all the planes with those. That can really limit the allied off maps. And it has some strong off maps itself, which are very helpful for the big team modes. Following that closely behind is Panzerjäger Command, and their worst performer is Armored Support, which is a bit of a surprise, but has received some nerfs in the recent patches. Moving up to 4v4 now, and for US forces, the only battle group with above 50% win rate is Airborne. Obviously, the carpet bombing doing a lot of heavy lifting there, but in terms of pick rate, it's quite low, so only the third most popular. The most popular is Advanced Infantry. Shocking for a DLC battle group. It is, by a decent margin, the most popular. Spec Ops coming up second, and it has a decent win rate, actually, second best win rate as well. So reversal of what we saw in the other modes where it was usually in the bottom two. In 4v4, it's the second best for US forces by a pretty narrow margin, admittedly. Obviously, Spec Ops with the Whizbang, a pretty popular option as well and performing decently. But then down the bottom for the strugglers, Italian Partisans, low pick rate, low win rate. The nerf to underground detonation, I imagine, making it very unpopular in 4s now. Heavy weapons, I'm a little bit surprised it's this low because I thought the Black Dragon was a pretty solid off map, and you don't have to go for the Pershing with how strong towed heavy AT guns are right now. I thought the M5 might carry it to a bit more success. For Wehrmacht, once again, it is Terror that has the highest win rate, the same as it does in all three other modes, but it also has the lowest pick rate. So you 4v4 players better wake up and start picking Terror a bit more often if you want to win more. Second best is Luftwaffe, which is a bit of a surprise because in all the other modes, it's in their bottom half. But somehow in 4s, it comes back out on top, and it's the second most popular. But the most popular is Mechanized, and it's got the third best win rate. It's got a lot to offer, the Panther, Smoke, Vespe, zeroing artillery. I think Mechanized very, very strong. And the lowest win rate belongs to Breakthrough, same story as it was in 3s. It's down in the dumps. For British forces, finally Canadian Shock is no longer the king. It's down in third place, and the number one performer is Air and Sea. It was the worst performer for 1v1s, but I think its roster of abilities and units makes a lot more sense for the bigger team modes, and that's rewarded with the highest win rate. Following it very closely behind is Heavy Armor, but the number one pick rate belongs to Indian Artillery, still above 50% win rate. Players love building those BL 5.5s, and I think in the big team modes, it makes a lot more sense because with the extra shells, you can just fire into an area for such a long time. And with the unit density of 4v4, you're basically guaranteed to hit something. The worst performer is Australian Defence, same as it was in 2s and 3s, so that makes me think maybe it will get buffed in the next patch, and Polish Cavalry following that. Finishing out with DAC in 4s, and once again it has a very low win rate spread between their best and worst battle group, which I think points towards a very strong core roster of units and upgrades for DAC. They don't really need the extra source from the battle groups that much. Their number one performer is Kriegsmarine, same story as it was in 3v3s. It's also the second most popular. The most popular belongs to Italian Infantry, and that's performing the third best at the moment, by far the most popular. Very popular in like every mode, Italian Infantry. Italian Combined Arms is the second most successful, but pretty low pick rate overall. I think you can play a pretty like manpower efficient style, spamming martyrs, recontractors and stuff with a strength and steel discount, doing a lot of vehicle recovery stuff like that with this battle group. The worst performer is Battlefield Espionage, and it's also by far picked the least. A huge thank you to Inverse for making all of this battle group information available to the public, and if you appreciate that and the excellent service COHDB provides to the Company of Heroes 3 community, make sure you stop by his Ko-Fi and give him a few dollars. Me, I'm eagerly awaiting the next patch, and now that we have this information, it will be interesting to see what changes Relic make in the upcoming balance patch.